Have you ever wondered why one people has been repeatedly singled out throughout history? The text you are about to hear opens the door to one of the longest, darkest, and most misunderstood stories in human history. For more than 2,000 years, was it because you stayed alone in a village? Alone. No fire for Hitler. Alone, no fire for the Inquisition, no fire for the Crusaders, not for the Romans. All our history continues from the days after the Roman emperor, our judges suffering torment, expelled, accused, hanged. So what happened? Are there different things for fixed victims during signatures? Prepare for an appropriate, intense, and absolutely necessary historical account. Before the beginning of this epic history, leave a comment containing another water-related civilization myth. Yes, imagine a world where you can admire a more beautiful Dio, but do not admire the others. Thus, the Romes of the era, an empire that conquered with swords, yet also with religious tolerance. All Egyptians and their villages, the painful sacrifices and the rituals in the villages, are seen as cultural equipment. While the empire is not accepted as a culture and this period may be debated, the emperor had absolute requirements that could not be negotiated in any way. The massive Jewish uprising to reclaim their lands failed. Rome's response was brutal. Jerusalem was leveled to the ground. Jews were expelled from their own city. Their practices were banned. Their traces erased, and their history officially began as a wandering people. For Rome, the Jews were a cultural mistake, a people who did not fit into the great imperial puzzle. For the Jews, Rome was nothing more than a pharaoh trying to destroy their faith, but the damage had been done. From that moment on, a belief took root that would last for centuries. The idea that the Jews were an unintegrable people, a foreign presence within the imperial body. And this was more frightening than any army, because fear of the other, when combined with power, almost always leads to persecution. For centuries, Jews were seen by the Romans as a people difficult to assimilate. But when Christianity began to spread, an even deeper chasm appeared. Because the new faith born from Judaism soon began to see its own parent as the enemy. In the beginning, Jesus' followers were Jews. They followed the same scriptures, the same traditions, the same holidays, but something changed. For them, Jesus was not just a teacher, he was the Messiah, the Son of God, the Savior. And the Jews did not accept him. From that moment on, division became inevitable. A powerful and dangerous doctrine emerged: supersessionism. According to this belief, Christianity was not just a continuation of Judaism. It replaced it. God no longer had a covenant with the Jews. His chosen people were now the church. This idea changed everything. The letters of the New Testament, especially those written to the Romans, began to be interpreted as direct criticisms of the Jewish people. They were said to be blind to the truth, existing only so divine grace could be shown to others. The message was distorted and resentment grew. It did not take long for Christian leaders to begin labeling Jews as killers of the Messiah. One of the church's great orators, St. John Chrysostom, called them godless and enemies of God. And his word was not only faith, it was law. Although widespread physical violence was not yet present, hostility turned theological prejudice into social exclusion. As early as the 2nd century, the Council of Elvira prohibited Christians from marrying or even eating with Jews. This discrimination became customary, but hatred soon turned into bloodshed. At the end of the 10th century, Pope Urban II launched the First Crusade to liberate the Holy Land from Muslim control. But many crusaders decided to test their zeal by attacking Jewish communities in Europe even before reaching Jerusalem. In cities like Worms, Mainz, Cologne, and Metz, thousands of Jews were brutally massacred. Even the bishop failed to protect them. They were given a choice: convert or die. For the Crusaders, the Jews were guilty for rejecting the Messiah and therefore unworthy of mercy, was an internal enemy. What was a holy war for some became an endless massacre for others. The message was clear. Loyalty to their faith made Jews permanent targets. Christianity, which preached love for one's neighbor, somehow found exceptions when the neighbor was accused of killing Christ. And so theological difference turned into systematic violence, into a spiritual chasm that never fully healed and seeded modern hatred. After the Crusades, hatred toward Jews found new ways to justify itself. Accusing them of killing Jesus was no longer enough. Darker, more dangerous rumors circulated. It began in 1144 in Norwich, England. A dead child was found, and without evidence, a monk accused the Jews of killing him as part of a ritual. From this, one of history's longest-lasting and bloodiest lies was born: the blood libel. The narrative was absurd but effective. Jews were accused of kidnapping and killing Christian children to use their blood in religious rituals. It did not matter that there was no evidence, nor that rabbis repeatedly denied it. Truth no longer mattered, only fear. And with fear came looting, torture, and massacres. Many rulers saw these accusations as an opportunity. They could seize property and erase debts, and blame a common enemy. What better way to consolidate power than to target a scapegoat who could not defend themselves? But the lies did not end there. Church synods increasingly imposed degrading measures. In 1215, the Fourth Lateran Council ordered Jews to wear distinctive clothing. This way, everyone could identify them, avoid them, single them out, or attack them. It was a meticulously designed system of exclusion, and if they could not blend in or work like everyone else, how could they survive? Here, another crucial piece of the puzzle appears: money. The church banned Christians from charging interest on loans, yet commerce kept growing. Someone had to fill that gap, and that someone was the Jews, not out of greed, but necessity. They could not own land, join guilds, or practice many common professions, so the only available path was lending money, and this made them even more hated. They became Europe's moneylenders, the bankers of kings and merchants, and soon the story changed again. Now, the Jews were greedy, corrupt, obsessed with gold. The stereotype was complete, and art reinforced it. Grotesque images of Jews suckling a pig, the infamous Judensau, were carved into churches and squares as symbols of ultimate humiliation. Some of these sculptures still stand today like stone wounds that time refuses to erase. Hatred no longer needed logic. It now had history, religion, politics, and economics. Jews were blamed not only for what they believed, but also for how they survived. And in that era, survival itself was almost a crime. The 14th century, Europe burns. The Black Death sweeps across the continent like a shadow, devouring entire cities. There is no cure, no explanation, only death and terror. In such times, logic is the first casualty. Someone spread a rumor. The wells were being poisoned. Oh, by whom? By the Jews, they said, because they were not dying as quickly, because they lived closer together, because they were different. and for many being different was the same as being guilty. In 1348, a man named Agimet was tortured until he confessed, under orders, that a rabbi had poisoned the water supplies in Venice and Toulouse. This confession, extracted under torture, was enough to ignite chaos. A wave of irrational violence followed. On February 14, 1349, around 900 Jews were burned alive in Strasbourg. The entire Jewish community in Basel was destroyed. Pogroms in Zurich and Geneva were equally brutal, yet the plague continued. As the death toll rose, so did the thirst for revenge. Lack of evidence did not matter. The fact that Jews were also dying of the plague did not matter. For many, the lie had already become sacred truth, and once again fear became a justification for annihilation. Some estimates say that during the plague, about 60% of European Jews died not from the disease but from the flames. Pope Clement VI attempted to stop the massacres by issuing papal bulls defending the Jews, but it was like trying to extinguish a wildfire with words. The mob did not listen. They wanted blood. And yet, in the midst of the horror, exceptions emerged. In Milan, for instance, the Duke decided to protect the Jews, knowing they were indispensable to the economy. The community there survived, but in a continent consumed by flames, it was a lonely exception. The plague did not only kill bodies, it killed consciences. And when it was over, it left behind empty towns and hearts filled with hatred. Anti-Semitism was no longer just a prejudice. It had become an ingrained habit, an automatic reflex. Because once an entire society learns to blame the same group, truth becomes irrelevant. The 19th century. Europe is shaken by scientific progress. Electricity, locomotives, telescopes, vaccines. But alongside science, pseudoscience also rises. And in this environment, anti-Semitism mutates once again. Now the issue is not just religion, economics, or false rituals. Now it is biology. In 1879, a German journalist named Wilhelm Marr coined a new word to turn anti-Semitism into a rational theory stripped of its religious component. Anti-Semitism. According to this new narrative, Jews were not just different. They were another race, an inferior one incompatible with European civilization. Intellectuals like Arthur de Gobineau wrote theses on racial inequality. Eugenics, a distorted and manipulated branch of biology, began to gain momentum. It classified humans based on genetic traits. And guess where the Jews were placed? Science was once again used as a weapon. With these theories came concrete restrictions. Jews were expelled from universities, banned from certain occupations, and prevented from marrying non-Jews. In many countries, their chances of emigrating were greatly reduced under the guise of scientific studies. But the hatred did not stop there. In 1894, the Dreyfus Affair shook France. Alfred Dreyfus, a Jewish army officer, was falsely accused of treason. The press condemned him even before the trial. Public opinion demanded his execution. Even though he was later exonerated, the message was clear. Being Jewish was enough to make you suspect. The same spirit fueled conspiracy theories like the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, a forged text claiming that Jews had a secret plan to rule the world. Despite being debunked countless times, many still believe it. Through ink and paper, the groundwork was laid for something far worse. Because once racism presents itself as science, hatred no longer needs justification. It becomes law, policy, inevitability. After World War I, Germany was devastated, defeated, humiliated. In this hopelessness, millions searched for answers, for someone to blame, and one man emerged. Adolf Hitler, a frustrated veteran, found his most powerful rhetoric in anti-Semitism. He did not create it. He inherited it and transformed it into doctrine. In his worldview, Jews were the root of all evil. Economic crisis, moral decay, communism, capitalism, everything, he claimed, was caused by a racial cancer, and the only solution was to eliminate it. In 1935, the Nuremberg laws legalized hatred. Marriages between Jews and non-Jews were banned. Citizenship rights were denied. Jews were expelled from schools, universities, public office. They were no longer neighbors, no longer Germans. They were the other. When World War II began, exclusion turned into imprisonment. First came ghettos like the one in Warsaw, closed, overcrowded districts with no access to food or medicine. Then came the cattle cars transporting people not to prisons but to death camps. In January 1942, at the Wannsee Conference, the Nazi High Command drafted what they called the final solution to the Jewish question. It was the coldest phrase ever used to describe genocide. A perfect machine was created. Auschwitz, Treblinka, Sobibor, Majdanek. Camps built for one purpose: extermination. Upon arrival, prisoners were separated. Those deemed fit were sent to forced labor, the rest to the gas chambers. Doctors like Joseph Mengele conducted inhuman experiments. Twins, pregnant women, all subjected to experiments and discarded when no longer useful. The most chilling part was that this was not done only by Nazis. Ordinary people across Europe, neighbors, workers, shopkeepers, took part in deporting their fellow citizens. Some from fear, some from hatred, most from indifference. In just a few years, 2/3 of Europe's Jewish population was murdered. Over 6 million people died not from disease or war, but simply because of who they were. And when the world discovered the crematoria, the piles of bodies, the suitcases labeled with names, it was too late. Centuries of hatred had reached its peak, and a civilization that thought itself modern and rational had failed in the most horrific way imaginable. Today, anti-Semitism no longer hides only behind religion or science. Sometimes it hides behind politics, ideology, activism. But the mechanism is the same, making one group the scapegoat for everything. The rhetoric changes, but the violence does not. And the most dangerous part is that humanity has stood at this cliff before. History does not repeat itself exactly, but its patterns do. Isolation, suspicion, lies, silence, normalized contempt. Hatred does not disappear on its own. It is inherited, taught, reinvented. And unless memory, education, and empathy confront it, it returns. Because whenever anti-Semitism comes back, it does not return with torches or uniforms at first. It returns in kind words, harmless jokes, and comments that normalize contempt until one day it is too late. Remembering is not a choice. It is an obligation. Because if we forget, we repeat. The solution is not only in laws or monuments. It lies in living memory, in noticing the signs, in educating, in speaking up, in refusing to remain silent when hatred disguises itself as an idea. Remembering is not looking back. It is preventing the same abyss from opening again. Not just never again, but never again. Thank you for listening this far. If you enjoyed this video and are curious about this type of content, subscribe to the channel to avoid missing the next videos and discover more fascinating stories. See you in the next one.